All right, welcome to the show, the lovely Craig Renney, reporter, broadcaster, journalist, Craig Renney. They're all correct, eh? All those titles are correct, eh, Craig? Craig Renney.
I would include the term Renaissance man, but yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's have a chat about budget lockup. Let's have a chat about what happened in Haifu, which was towards the end of last year. And you were what appeared to be controversially kept out of Haifu, the half-yearly update, whatever it stands for officially. And my understanding is there had been no other economic lockups that you'd ever been kept out of, denied from. That was like the first one.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if it's ever really been told, but I heard Jordan Williams talking a bit about the story behind why the Taxpayers Union aren't able to attend that lockup. So why don't you give us a heads up as to, should we say why you think you're kept out, or do you know this for sure as to why you're kept out?
Let me tell you what I know.
Yeah, cool.
So at the half-year economic and fiscal update, which happens in December, that's a lockup held by the Treasury to give us early access to the government books. They do this every 6 months. In December, they do the half year, and in May, they do the full budget. The CTU, as we do every time there is an economic lockup, had applied for a seat at that lockup in order to be able to get access to the books so that we can then interpret that information for our more than 300,000 members. That has never in the past been a problem. That has always just been something, it's just been an automatic tick. And a range of organizations attend. So there's banks, there are financial institutions, there's a whole range of journalists. And then there are other NGO organizations like ourselves who attend these things. So at the half-year economic and fiscal update, it's a smaller crowd because it's more technical. But at the budget, you find people like the Salvation Army. You find people like the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists, the senior doctors' trade unions, the Public Service Association, as well as the New Zealand Initiative, the Taxpayers Union, a whole people from a range of organizations. And that's been a long-standing thing. We've had David Farrar representing Kiwi Blog in Labour Party lockups. So this hasn't been a political issue in the past. In December last year, the Treasury informed me that it had made a decision that it would no longer allow the CTU access to the half-year lockup. It also, at the same time, barred the Taxpayers Union, Business New Zealand, and the New Zealand Initiative on the grounds that we no longer needed access to that information. Financial institutions, big Australian banks, they needed access to that information, but we did not. And so as a consequence, we couldn't get into that lockup. The lockups are important not just for giving us access to information, they also help us have conversations with journalists, help us answer their questions in the lockup, so that we're setting the media narrative and the media tone for the reporting that comes out of that lockup. So this is the first time in living memory that had ever happened in December. We discovered this week that they have also repeated this now for the budget, and they've locked out a wide range of institutions as well.
Let's go back as well to Haifu, because they gave you a reason as to why this common occurrence of, they call them third-party groups, but, you know, entities that aren't direct media, aren't the groups that speak directly to the people, but they're intermediary groups who speak to the media, who speak to people. And let's bring up an email that they told you about. Let me read out to the people exactly what it says as to their new rationale. It says this. Of you attending, or of people attending the lockups. To meet that purpose, the Treasury will continue to accept applications from journalists representing organisations who are registered with the Parliamentary Press Gallery or the New Zealand Media Council. Using these external criteria, meaning those two groups, ensures the Treasury is not making subjective decisions about who is or is not a journalist. We'll get to the rest of that in a minute, but what you haven't explained, I don't think yet, or maybe I've missed it, is exactly why you were kept out of lockup, because there are some rumours going around that it might have been a bit more personal.
It may be. Again, certainly the OIA chain that was produced later by Thomas Coughlan, the journalist at the NZ Herald, suggested that the request for me not to attend that came from the Minister of Finance's office directly, rather than coming from the Treasury itself.
And that was repeated. So that story was repeated today by Jordan Williams talking to Sean Blunkett around why the taxpayers union is getting blocked, basically hinting at, and I'll say this in case this is the idea, basically hinting at, because Nicola Willis doesn't want you specifically there, the only way they can do that is to put a criteria in that eliminates you, but that then catches up a whole bunch of other groups. Now, whether that's 100% right or there's nuance to it, that's the general vibe that's out there. Is that fair?
Certainly, that's the impression around Wellington, right, is that they don't want that kind of informed analysis in the lockup, informing the other journalists in the lockup about what's in and what's out. They don't want those sorts of questions, and as a consequence, they've chucked me out, and they've chucked out a range of other people as well as a consequence. Because if they chuck me out, they've got to chuck lots of people out.
So talk about Budget Day 2025 now. What has Treasury told you and the CTU about attending?
So they've just told us very simply that you're no longer, you're again barred from the restricted lockup. The CTU is barred. The criteria are now only that journalists and financial institutions can access this document, because there's no longer a need for your members or the people you represent to have early access to that information. So they've repeated that again.
And when you say journalists with the air quotes, that's actually correct, because as we know from the Treasury, from the email that we've just read, the external criteria of being a part of the New Zealand Media Council or the Parliamentary Press Gallery means that Treasury is not deciding what is and isn't a journalist. And we can also infer things like, we all remember when Cameron Slater went to court, I think it was to not reveal some of his sources because he claimed to be a journalist, and they tested that in court. But then he also won a journalist award for the best blog or whatever it was. So so in this day and age, even though, for example, I don't call myself a journalist, I'll be a commentator or a reporter or whatever, but in this day and age, basically what they're saying is anyone acting as a journalist can be considered a journalist. Fair?
Fair, as long as they're inside an organization which is inside those two accredited bodies, the Press Gallery or the Media Council.
I think that's fair for what we're talking about now. I guess my comment about anyone, that's more of a broader within society.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so this is where I'll take over the story that we're telling, this fabulous bedtime story. We heard about this last year, and we thought, oh, there's going to be some swings and roundabouts, pros and cons of being part of the New Zealand Media Council. So whilst most independent media doesn't want a kind of bar of it because it kind of commits a place to be that if people want to complain about you, they can, etc., etc. We actually thought, oh, maybe we should do it. So across summer, we thought about it. The start of this year, we talked about it. I applied to be a part of the Media Council to see if they thought what we do. Now, this is not just BHN, but this is the whole company, which is now multiple podcasts and broadcast spaces, would be warranting from their side of things to be a part of them. And as you can see here, part of the digital media membership, there is Blindfish Media, which is the company that makes BHN and makes your podcast Locked Up. Locked Up might be what happens if Trump takes over this country. Yeah. Locked Out is what happened then.
Yeah, and so Locked Out, which is part of the Blindfish Media group, which I'm the journalist and the reporter for,
and presenter and broadcaster, all those things,
is inside that that Venn diagram of the people who are allowed inside lockups, where the Treasury is not going to make distinctions about who or who is not a journalist.
Yep. Okay. So what I did was I applied for Blindfish Media to send a reporter along to lock up to then disseminate that information to the public. We were talking about doing a live stream on the day of, so 2 p.m. when embargoes come up. That gives us a chance to get in there yet. And this year, May the 12th, we get a response from Treasury. Kia ora, Pat, we are confirming your registration for the Budget 2025 embargo briefing under lockup conditions. Says all of those things. Then it says registrations, Blindfish Media attendee Pat Brittenden. So they said yes to me. To which I replied to them, "Oh, just so you know, just checking. We applied for our Wellington-based reporter to come, not me personally. I assume that makes no difference. Just checking." To which the response was, "Apologies. Yes, I see we had just put your name down. Just let us know the name of the journalist when you have assigned the person, and then ask them to reply to the accepted rules." So we did. You are Blindfish Media, BHN's reporter, journalist.
Yep.
And we sent the email to you. You sent it to Treasury. You fulfilled all the criteria.
Correct.
And carbon copied us in. And a few days later, this is the response we get. It's a long email, but I'm going to read it all. It says this. Kia ora, Pat. We wanted to remember, they've already said yes to Blindfish Media and yes to our Wellington reporter. They've said that. They've already given that the thumbs up. Kia ora, Pat. We wanted to follow up on your registration interest for Budget 2025 restricted briefing. The purpose of Ministerial and Treasury restricted briefings is to provide advanced access to material under embargo for media and economic and financial analysts to accurately report to the public and markets. We accept registrations from journalists representing organisations who are registered with the Parliamentary Press Gallery or the New Zealand Media Council, which we are.
Correct.
We understand that you have provided the name of a Wellington-based reporter to represent Blindfish Media at the Budget Lockup. Could you please confirm that this is the same Craig Renney that is currently Policy Director and Economist for the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions? For your awareness, past lockup attendees have included representatives from organisations including peak bodies, professional bodies, unions, industry bodies, and industry information services, as well as advocacy groups, charities, and large corporates, among others. In line with the criteria used to assess registration, these organisations do not require advanced access to the information, and we will be able to access it once the embargo is lifted on 2 p.m. on the day. So they're basically saying, we used to do this, we don't do this anymore. Okay. Yeah. Accordingly, if it is the same individual as above, we regret to inform you that they would be declined from this year's budget lockup. While we carefully consider registrations from media commentators, we are unable to accept individuals. I just realized the whole time I wasn't showing it to you. Unable to represent those individuals whose primary role is to represent an organisation that has not met our criteria. This is particularly relevant in cases where both individual and organisation have been declined. If you would like to send an alternative representative from your organisation, we will consider this decision further. It's an interesting way they finished it, because they've already accepted that we can have a reporter, but now they seem to be saying, no, we might, even though we've said yes, we might do it again. And I have just realized that I didn't include as a screen grab my response to them, which I probably should do. Let me just, I won't show this because I haven't taken like all the things out of this. So yeah. What I've said back to them on that is, we wanted to follow up on this. The purpose of that's theirs. Sorry. Sorry, I got the wrong. It says what happens when you don't prepare, when you're not professional enough to be a part of the lockup. This is what I've said. Craig Renney works for my media company, my media council member company, Blindfish Media, as both a reporter for BHN, our flagship news commentary show, and as a broadcaster in his own podcast that we produce. I have no connection to the work he does for the CTU or what the CTU puts him forward for. He works with me as a reporter and broadcaster, disseminating economic information to the New Zealand public. We are running a live BHN show at 2 p.m. on budget day. We will be using Craig as our reporter to disseminate budget information to our audience. His primary role for my business is as a reporter and economic issues. I trust that Treasury will reconsider the decision not to allow Craig into the lockup, as you now understand his vital role in reporting the budget content for the BHN audience at 2 p.m. once the embargo is lifted. That was sent last night. I have contacted Treasury as of time of recording, which is approaching 5 p.m. I have contacted Treasury, I think, 3 times today. We are yet to hear back. Craig.
Yep. So the key line there is, for me, is the bottom line in that response from the Treasury. So where they say, if you would like to send an alternative representative from your organization, please, we will consider this issue further.
Yeah.
That suggests that the lockup and the lockout here is personal. It's not just about the CTU. It's not just about Blindfish Media. It's actually saying, if you want to send somebody else other than Craig, we might let you in.
Which then takes us right back to the original email they sent you, where they say, when we use these external criteria, the Treasury therefore is not making subjective decisions about who is or is not a journalist. Yet in the response to me, they are saying you are not a journalist.
You can't have it both ways. You
Yeah.
can't say we accept applications from people who are members of the Media Council without question, because that's externally verified, right? And then say, oh, everyone from that group except this person here.
So this is the thing. This is the thing now. They've moved. Now, I have to say Treasury, I guess, but is there being a knee placed on the neck from further up the chain? Whoever is making these decisions, these very recent decisions, in fact, only since this government has been in, whoever is making those decisions is now saying these third party groups can't come. And now they're saying this accredited media source can't come because we don't accept their journalist. They are saying this government is saying, or Treasury, this government is saying that we are going to censor the information that we've already said. This is how we provide. We've jumped through your hoops. We've done that. And now you're saying, yeah, but not him. In fact, they've even said, Pat, you can come. And I was talking to Chewy about this last night, Craig. I think Chewy made a very good point to me after the show was finished. So I'm dyslexic, right? They're happy for me to come. They're happy for me to look at this 1,000,000-page document and me to open it and for me to basically think I'm reading Latin. So they're happy for me to do that. But they're not happy for you to come, the person who would actually look at that Latin and be able to translate it perfectly into 2025 Kiwi English. Why would any group, why would any government or any Treasury want to send along the rodeo clown and be happy with that and not the person who actually can disseminate this to the public?
It's a great question, Pat. Is that if you want to encourage public debate, if you want to encourage transparency, if you want to encourage actually accurate reporting of what's inside the budget, right? Then you need to allow people who are able to understand it to be able to access that documentation in a way that allows that to be part of the media conversation when the documents are released publicly.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're essentially saying, nope, we're going to allow any media organization that is accredited except you, and you aren't allowed in, and you aren't allowed in twice. You aren't allowed in as the CTU because we're going to stop third-party organizations from accessing it. But then if you, as a reporter and journalist, then apply through an accredited organization, we're going to say, no, you're not a reporter. You can have any flavor of reporter you like, as long as it isn't this flavor of reporter. And that's wild. We're into a different place where you're saying, hang on a second, we're now picking and choosing the reporters in particular places. It's a very Trumpian world when you're accessing that. And that's a very different thing to just barring every non-government organization.
Craig, I've got a personal question for you. I was going to ask you, what if you gave Nikki some flowers, but I won't say that. Do you think Treasury wants you in the lockup?
I honestly don't know, is the honest answer. The OIA release last time round certainly seemed to suggest that the Treasury had a lot of sympathy and couldn't find a reason under the current embargo rules to stop me from attending. And there certainly seemed to be a degree of sympathy for keeping me in the lockup in that OIA release. I honestly don't know now. We had the CTU held a meeting with the Treasury Secretary, and we talked about these issues. We had a very pleasant conversation. I'm not going to go into the details of that because that was a private meeting. But at no point in time has anyone from the Treasury at any point in time signaled to me that the Treasury does not wish me to be in there. But all of that to one side for just a second. There's what worries me is you, Pat, have gone through all the hoops necessary in order to do what is needed. We have gone through all the hoops necessary in order to get. I'm not a security risk, right? I'm not, I'm not going to suddenly leap with. I've been to lots of these lockups before. I'm not going to try and rush for the door with a bunch of papers, right? Or try and plaster them on the windows so people can see, what's going on, right? I'm a professional. This is my job, right? This can only be about access to information, right?
I was going to say we had John Minto on last night, and he made the point. I'm paraphrasing, but pretty close to the quote is that to be a democracy, everybody needs to participate. And how's this any different?
Yep. Well, you don't. The purpose of holding a lockup is to give people access to the information, and that doesn't work if you're only giving the people that you like access to that information. And it certainly doesn't help, at least with the perception of transparency, that you not only block a whole range of non-government organizations from accessing it, but then you go a step further and you start blocking some media, accredited media outlets, from accessing that sort of activity, from accessing this information.
I was talking to someone today, and the point they made, again, it was a private conversation, but the point they made was this government is so very keen to get their narrative and messaging out and off the ground that anyone who might do due diligence like yourself in there to get out at 2:00 and paint a different narrative might actually be the reason they don't want it, because they're not doing well in their internal polling, and they do not want. Maybe they know there's a narrative that's going to come in, but it's like lies gets around the world before truth gets its pants on. Maybe they're just keen as if they can get the headlines out that they want for the first 3, 4, 5 hours, then anything else that's found by someone who's not in there before 2:00, they may go to page 3 rather than page 1. That feels like quite a logical result to me.
And what the media often do in the lockups themselves is they will pull analysts to one side, put them on camera, and then say, "What do you say?" And that they cut that video in order to then have it all ready to go the millisecond the lockup embargo is released, so that they can then put different voices on the conversation. If you're restricting those different voices, then you're restricting essentially the kinds of messages that then get released to the public.
Craig, this is a story we all obviously continue to keep an eye on, which is because it's kind of our story now. But as I do a refresh on my emails at 5:01 p.m. on the Wednesday, there is no response yet. It's approaching 24 hours. In fact, I think it is probably 24 hours. If anything happens between now and 9:00, we'll tell the team tonight. But for that, won't we leave it at that for today? We have all our cards on the table. We are not a vindictive group here. We are not about embarrassing anybody. We just want the access that we are entitled to. Mr. Luxon, you know about that word. We want the access that we're entitled to because we jumped through your hoops. Or I want you to point to the reason, Section 5, Subset 4, Part D, that eliminates this accredited company sending along the journalist of its choice to report back and disseminate the information to the public. Show us that, and I will back down and I will apologize. But until we see that, Craig, we'll just stay in touch.
You can point out any part of any activity of BHN which has previously broken an embargo, previously done something that would make us an information risk at that point in time. That, to my mind, to the best of my knowledge, there isn't anything. So as a consequence, and as a consequence,
best of my knowledge as well, Craig. Best of my knowledge.
For the purposes of the lawyers in the room, to the best of my knowledge, that is absolutely the case. And very key. Again, if someone wants to say, "Do you know what? Mea culpa. We've made a mistake. Let's fix it." Fine. Sensational. I'll be the first person on Twitter saying, "Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you then." End of conversation.
Yeah. Very good. All right, Craig. You have a good night tonight. Enjoy your red carpeting, whatever it is that you're doing. And I'm sure we'll be talking in the next 24 hours. For other people who are unaware of this yet, Craig's podcast will be out on Friday morning this week, not Thursday morning. I don't know if you noticed, Craig, but all the imaging around this conversation we had was locked out to start off with. So we did like a little subtle advert for it as well. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning, and thanks for your time tonight. And media, feel free to call. You've got the information now.
Thank you.